These events occurred during a year I moved from Belfast in Ireland to a city in the mainland UK for university. In order to pay the bills, I needed a job, and it just so happened that a guy I had worked with back home was in charge of opening a UK branch of a bar chain that started in Ireland in the same city at the exact same time. He sorted me out with a job right away, and I became a de facto supervisor manager when he wasn't around, solely because I was the first employee hired. Gradually, he hired a handful of Irish students, and the bar, despite the fact that it had no remotely Irish features, became known as an Irish bar. Can't really blame them, as it had an Irish owner, an Irish supervisor manager, and over half the employees were Irish. I and two other guys, both English, I'll call them Kevin and Jake, became close and worked the most shifts, getting to know the regulars. There were a few creepy drunken guys or people trying to sneak drugs in the toilets, but nothing worse than what goes on in every bar or club. That was until a certain regular who would usually frequent the place at quiet hours and sit in the mini nooks, avoiding chit-chat, started to make conversation with the workers. Immediately, I understood why he avoided talking to anyone, as he obviously had suffered severe trauma to his cheek or neck area. He was a slim, unhealthy-looking man in his early 60s with a sunken dent on the right side of his face and a massive scar running from the corner of his mouth to his temple. His voice was also extremely croaky and deep, and I would have to lean over the counter, putting my ear within centimeters of his mouth, to even sort of hear him. I would end up just smiling and nodding like an idiot, so as to avoid being rude. The only things I definitely always made out were Belfast, Armagh, another city in Ireland, and Yellow Dog. I felt sorry for him because I assumed he had suffered throat cancer or something similar and always humored him even though he was nearly impossible to hear. I would normally walk the short distance home from work even though it was through the city center during the middle of the night. It was nearly always busy as it was a big student town. I only had one weird experience because of this when I was stopped by a tall, nervous-looking guy down the one alleyway I had to walk. He asked me for a cigarette, and when I told him I didn't smoke, he noticed my accent and started walking with me, talking about being from Ireland. I was pretty uncomfortable at this point, as it was like 200 yards until I reached the busy high street where he surely wouldn't try anything, but he kept saying, "My dad's Irish. Give me your number and I'll sort you out." Whatever the hell that meant. He kept telling me to get my phone out so I could take his number. It was obvious to me that he just wanted to see if it was worth stealing so he could mug me. After much insistence that I was okay, he eased off as we neared the high street and said, "I like you, mate. If you ever get in any bother, tell them you're Jameson's name changed cousin." I just mumbled thanks and figured I was lucky to get out of being mugged. When I mentioned this to Jake, he laughed and told me that I definitely was lucky as the Jamesons were the main gang in the city. He told me that they were traditionally Irish travelers, but mostly now English and liked to look after their own. Cool, I was an honorary gang member, I thought, and forgot about it. Months later, we were talking about some of the characters that show up at the bar, and a member of the door staff who was joking around said to me, "I'm surprised you're so friendly with a para." He explained that the scarred regular was a member of the British Army Parachute, Para Regiment, and had served in Ireland. I should now explain why I've mentioned Ireland so much this far. For people that don't know, there has been plenty of death and heartache in Ireland going back hundreds of years. In 1916, it was split into the bottom 26 counties, known as the Republic of Ireland, independent, and the top 6 counties became Northern Ireland, controlled by the British government. Belfast, where I'm from, is the capital of Northern Ireland and experienced its worst time from the 1960s to the 1990s, known as the Troubles. Nationalists, Republicans, who wanted a full 32-county United Ireland, were at war with Unionists, loyalists, who wanted to remain under British rule. It resulted in plenty of death and wrongdoing on both sides. During this time, the British government sent in their army, which only served to escalate tensions, and many atrocities were committed by the British Army against the nationalist Republican side. As a result, there is a massive dislike and mistrust of the British Army in this part of the island. Also, people who work in an Irish bar would generally consider themselves nationalists. Not always, but it was true for all the members of staff I worked with. Anyway, sorry if that was long. I brushed off that bit of info, thinking he was a harmless old codger and that I wouldn't let old prejudice get the better of me. The old guy started coming in more and more, always doing the same thing. Sit at the bar, order 2 bottles, drink one and give the other to whoever served him, and then leave after some 90% audible chat. I then began to notice he would only ever get a second beer for the English employees. I was being stupid, I told myself. The troubles were a long time ago and the majority of people have moved on. But then another Irish employee mentioned it to me. Whatever. Let him hold his prejudice. It was 2013. I wasn't about to let some old sectarian loser get me annoyed. He still talked to me and I still smiled politely and nodded. It wasn't until I started thinking back on it that he was always sneering as he talked to me when he mentioned Ireland. He then began to only talk to Kevin or Jake, both of whom were in the pretty boy mold. Short, slim, good-looking guys in their early 20s who were chatty and good fun. He would start to stay longer and only talk with them. Often, he would be clearly looking at me and saying stuff, smirking that I couldn't make him out. When I would ask them what he said, they would just shrug and say, "How the heck am I meant to know?" and laugh. What really set off alarm bells in my head was when he began to come in for a drink with guys of similar description and ply them with drinks all night. Always young men shorter than him with a slim build. Guy in his 60s buying drink all night for unassuming young men. I mean, it could be all above board, but it seemed very off to me. My suspicions were confirmed when I was told that while I was back at home for midterm, he had been caught by the bouncer supplying the poor young guy he was in with that night with ecstasy, hopefully in exchange for just cash, although something told me otherwise. I figured that was the end of that. He'd be in prison, and I'd forget he even existed until one night I walked home from work at about 3 a.m. and swiped my key card to get in the grounds of my halls. The gate was electric and took like 5 minutes to slowly close, making it easy for someone without a key card to sneak in. As I walked a short distance to the actual front door of my halls, I heard quick footsteps and swung around to see the scarred-up, drug-dealing ex-army guy staring right back at me. I was shocked. What the heck am I supposed to do? I was pretty sure I could take him if it came to that, although maybe he would pull some crazy army shit. He just kept staring at me and babbling incoherently. I had no idea what I was supposed to do, and we just stared at each other from a few yards away for what seemed like 20 minutes. Then he began to creep slowly towards me. I wanted to quickly get through the door to my halls, but it was another slow-moving gate that he could follow me through. I was mentally preparing myself to have to get physical with this guy, when I desperately remembered my run-in with a gang member. "Listen, mate, I'm a cousin of the Jamesons. Do you want me to get them on the phone?" I blurted out. I was pretty anxious in case he said, "Yes, go ahead and let them come around." But after a few seconds, his face broke out in a familiar, disgusting smirk. The kind that said, "I'm almost certain that you're bullshitting me, but I'm not about to risk it." He turned and bolted the now closed gate with unnerving ease. I didn't see him again for the rest of the year, but found out when I returned in September from the bouncer who caught him with drugs and had been involved with the prosecution that he was now in prison. He was indeed an ex-British Army soldier who had served in South Armagh, a particularly bad area during the Troubles for a soldier to be based, with the Yellow Dog Parachute Regiment. He was notorious for preying on young students and supplying them with drugs in return for sex. He also had an intense hatred for Irish people. I'm assuming he had some pretty rough times while serving there and liked to do the rounds of all the Irish bars, taunting their staff. As a result of this, he became an enemy of the Jamesons for years. The creepiest thing from all of this is that, on thinking back, I'm pretty sure that he was saying some pretty racist or xenophobic things to me every chance he got, but I just nodded like an idiot because I didn't want to be rude. I shudder to think what he was actually saying to Kevin or Jay.